Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're out at the range with a classic pistol. This is a Colt 1911. This one is a Series 80 pistol. I've replaced the grips on it with these wooden diamond style grips, but it's just a beautiful classic handgun. This one's had no work done to it. Still has the original 3-dot sights and all that good stuff. And this is probably the 1911 that'll wind up going through the gauntlet tests. But Colt became known for making the 1911. Now, of course, they didn't design it, but they did manufacture it in large numbers, supplied them to the military along with a number of other manufacturers. But Colt and 1911s are somewhat synonymous these days. When you say 1911, a lot of people are going to think Colt off the top of their head. And rightly so. Colt is probably one of the best known manufacturers of the gun. But Colt also decided in the late 80s to try to evolve the handgun, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. I think few would argue that the 1911 isn't one elegant, beautiful shooting, very pleasant to shoot 45 ACP caliber handgun, although it was offered in other calibers. Most people would agree the ergonomics are spot on. The gun's known for its reliability. It's probably one of the best handguns or best firearms that John Browning ever designed, and it did serve our military for 75 years as its primary sidearm. But even after being replaced by the Beretta M9 in 1985, it still continues on in service today, and you'll still find these in armories around the United States and around the world on U.S. military bases. But Colt, like I said, decided they wanted to modernize the gun in the 80s because we're going through this double action auto craze back then, and everybody was trying to get a double action automatic to the market just before the striker fired pistols really started to take off. So first we're going to do a little bit of shooting here with this classic 1911. Then we're going to show you this Albatross that Colt came up with that wound up being one of their major flops. All right, here's Mr. Elegant, one of the most popular handguns in American history. And the Colt's evolution of the most beautiful handgun they ever built, the Double Eagle. Oh my God. This thing is an abomination. All right, so why do I call it an abomination? Well, first of all, they've taken a 1911 slide and they've married it to this afterthought of a lower receiver that has a double action mechanism in it. The handgun even includes a decocking lever, which is pretty much Colt's attempt to copy other handguns of the era like the Smith & Wesson Model 59s and things like that. So there was this race in the late 80s and early 90s to manufacture double action autos because police departments were adopting them, civilians wanted to buy them, the government had already adopted one in 1985 as the M9 Beretta, and so it was kind of the craze. They called it the Wonder 9 craze, except this one's chambered in 45 ACP. So Colt didn't want to miss that bandwagon, so instead of designing a pistol from the ground up, they took the 1911 and just stuck a double action mechanism on it. Now, one of the prime contributors to the design is a gentleman by the name of Ron Smith, the Smith Enterprises, or so the story goes, and he helped develop the double action mechanism, which really is kind of a take of a C-Scamp pistol. And you'll notice that the grip on this thing comes up and goes over the double action mechanism. If you take this grip off, you expose the double action trigger of the handgun. Now, there's early versions of this gun, and from what I've read, I've never handled one, they were really, really poor quality. And if you took this grip panel off, springs and everything else would shoot out and the gun was very difficult to maintain. And from what I've read, this is a better gun. I've not shot it a whole bunch. I just have it in my collection because I wanted it as an oddball. Now, this one works okay, but I will say that the ergonomics completely screwed up. You can see how it has this big hump back here. Of course, there is no grip safety. Okay, that was a wise move on Colt's part. However, they've lowered this area back here and it sets really high in the hand and naturally wants to point low. It's a bit thick, and as far as I know, not too many people made aftermarket grips, if anybody did, for the handgun. It wasn't quite made for 10 years. So let's go ahead and shoot this gun. It was offered in a number of different calibers eventually. By 1992, they had started to offer the gun not just in 45 ACP, but they also offered it in 9mm, 38 Super, 10mm, and at the end of its production run, the end of its life, they even offered a few of them in 40 Smith & Wesson. Here's an interesting note. The 40 Smith & Wesson Double Eagles are among the most rare, but they're also the ones that command the lowest price if you go to buy one on the used gun market. The 10mm, though, are more common, but they also command a highest price of any of the Double Eagles that are out there. They even made an aluminum frame combat commander version of it. I'm sorry, an officer's model, I believe it was, is the smallest one. So they did have the full size, the Combat Commander, and then they had the officer's model sizes. Again, this is the full size. So let's go ahead and load this up. It uses standard 1911 magazines, so you had that magazine compatibility. To charge it, it would be just like any other 1911. You'll notice that the Combat Commander style hammer is back. I'm going to go ahead and hit the decock lever here on this side. You'll notice the trigger goes forward, the hammer goes down, and now you can carry it as a double action auto. Heck, I like that part. I mean, I carry a double action auto, right? Well, the ergonomics and everything else combined just makes for one ugly, awkward shooting pistol. So this one works really, really good. It does not have any functional issues. We're out here today shooting some 230 grain Hush ammunition from Freedom Munitions. It is actually from their Hush line, but standard 230 grain ball is typically subsonic anyway if you're shooting it through a suppressor. So that's it, guys. That's how this thing works. Now let's do some more shooting with it. I want Jason to shoot it as well, give his thoughts, but this is just one ugly, awkward handgun. I wouldn't recommend it if you're looking for a double action 45 auto for concealed carry, because again, they're not known for being extremely durable. The trigger mechanisms are prone to failure with extended use. But if you're a collector, you might want to check out Gun Broker or Guns America. You may be able to pick one up. So anyway, let's load up some more magazines, do some more shooting with this little guy, and also the original 1911, the gun I actually love. I love shooting the 1911 simply because I think it's one of the most shootable handguns on the market. And it's kind of the de facto standard when you're talking about ergonomics of handguns. Now, some will argue that the 1911 isn't as ergonomic as other folks like myself make it out to be, but I think that's just wrong. But of course, everybody's built differently and everybody has different, preferences and things like that. So if you don't like the way the 1911 feels, you're kind of the odd man out, because most people would agree with me that it's probably one of the best shooting, most ergonomic handguns on the planet. For shooting such a big cartridge, it's extremely controllable and extremely pleasant to shoot. Some people get it in their minds that the 45 kicks, and it really doesn't. So I'm going to go ahead and put that one down and pick up the Double Eagle. Now, it's a Double Eagle, is ergonomic. First of all, it feels like I'm holding on to a Glock 20. It just has this big fat grip on it. Other than that, the controls with regards to how you charge the weapon and even the slide stop are the same, but you'll notice that the decocker is right underneath the slide stop. So it's kind of in an awkward location and it's not very easy to get to. It's just a piece of sheet metal that's sticking out, and you can just reach over there with your thumb and decock the handgun. So now that first shot's going to be double action. Every follow-up shot after that, just like any other Wonder 9mm pistol, of course this is a 45, will then be single action. The double action is nice and light and smooth. It's not a horrible double action, but the grip angle is just awkward on the gun. You'll notice it just threw a piece of brass right back into my face. Kind of ejects all over the place. Typically it's throwing the brass out that way, but several times this afternoon it's throwing it right back at me, hit the brim of my hat, and then the magazine release, like on a 1911, it's easy for me to get to a magazine release, but because the grips are so chunky, I actually have to turn the gun in my hand, even with my ape-like features, to get that magazine to drop. It's just not nearly as ergonomic. Again, we're just using standard 1911 magazines. This is the magazine out of the other pistol. Stick it in there, you have your slide stop, charges the weapon. Mr. Rubber Dummy down there is taking a beating from those 230 grain ball rounds. But yeah, I don't know. Let's let Jason shoot this thing. I just think it's awkward and unergonomic. Not very comfortable to shoot. Not nearly as nice as just a standard straight up 1911. All right, it's Jason's turn.
So you have to say, shooting this thing is very awkward. The grip is really fat, just like he said, a Glock 20, and it does make me want to point the pistol down. And the ejection is definitely all over the place. But still a fun piece to shoot.
It's kind of interesting in watching Jason shoot the double eagle. He was having false locks with the gun where the slide stop gets pushed up and causes the slide to lock to the rear. He was purposely trying to keep his thumbs away from it, but just the ergonomics of the gun are so awkward that he couldn't avoid hitting it, which he doesn't have that problem with the standard 1911. I don't have that problem, knock on wood. I just can't stand the ergonomics of the pistol. Again, I got to really try to hit that that magazine release. Now you'll notice the ejection is all over the place. It's throwing them back here, it's throwing them over here. It's just ejecting everywhere, where the standard 1911 is a lot more consistent. But let's walk down range. Our rubber dummy down here, it's still a shootable handgun. I mean, I'm not really trying to shoot for groups. I'm just aiming center of mass, and Mr. Rubber Dummy's getting pretty much his sternum full of lead. So you can still be shot fairly decently, but man, it's just not nearly as pleasant as a standard 1911. It kind of takes the fun out of it. Let's take it apart and look inside and see what it looks like as compared to a Series 80 1911. Let's start off by taking apart the 1911 first. Make sure the weapon's empty, magazine's out of the gun. Check the chamber. All right, now I'm gonna stick the gun upwards like this, push down on the plunger, and rotate the bushing out of the way. And now I can push the slide back to its takedown notch, which is right about there. Push across on the pin, and it'll pop out, in theory. Take the pin out. Now the slide will just slide right off the frame. Pull your guide rod and spring out. Push the drop link forward. Rotate your bushing the opposite direction there so it'll come out. And your barrel bushing come out. All right, so field stripping of the standard 1911. Straightforward and easy enough to do if you've done it a few times. All right, so how does a double eagle stack up? Well, it's basically a 1911. Magazine's out of the gun. Going to go ahead and make sure that the chamber is empty, which it is. Go ahead and stick the gun in this position. Push down on the plunger. Take the plunger out. Push the gun back to its takedown notch. Now you'll notice the pin that you push on right here on the frame is kind of hidden behind this really thick grip panel that's covering up the double action. So you kind of have to push your finger in this way, and then you can pull the stop pin or the slide stop pin out, and then you just kind of push forward and it comes apart just like a standard 1911. Again, draw your recoil spring and guide rod out, push your drop link forward, rotate the bushing so it can come off, and then just push your barrel out the front of the slide. Now the two slides are pretty much identical. Matter of fact, I can put the double eagle slide right onto the 1911. It's the same thing, and vice versa. I can take 1911 slide and slide it right onto the double eagles. Everything from bottom up is the same. Slide, barrel, bushing, recoil spring, all that stuff is the same. Where the differences lie is in the lower. So the lower has It's a double action trigger mechanism, which is covered up again by this grip panel. I'm not going to take it off because out here in the field because I don't want to lose any small parts. But the trigger mechanism is exposed to the elements. You can see the whole trigger, double action trigger system is just sitting there wide open, unprotected. On the inside, it has the Series 80 style safety lever that pops up, which pushes the pin on the plunger on the slide that releases the firing pin so it can go forward just like a standard 1911, right? On the Series 80, you can see how that little arm is popping up. So they're really the same gun on top. The only difference on the bottom is just this goofy double action trigger system and the awkward grip panels in the absence of a grip safety. This double action mechanism is obviously an afterthought. It reminds me of the original Colt Lightning, which was a double action revolver that came about after the Peacemaker, the 1873 Army. Once again, Colt was in a hurry to kind of modernize their pistols, so they just took a single action Colt, jerry-rigged this god-awful double action trigger mechanism onto it. It was frail, it would often break, and wasn't very reliable. 100 years later, they do the exact same thing with the Double Eagle. It's just an afterthought. I hope you guys enjoyed coming out, taking a look at one of the oddballs in my collection, which is the Colt Double Eagle, chambered in 45 ACP. Do I recommend you guys run out and buy one off Gun Broker? Not really, not unless you're a collector. The guns are goofy, finicky, just general oddballs. It's just one of those cool things from history. Another one of the Colt flops. As I said earlier in the video, it has a striking resemblance to the Lightning double action revolver that they came up with in the 1800s, which was just this goofy marriage of a single action army with a really chintzy double action mechanism, which was just a complete afterthought. And they did the exact same thing in the 1990s, or starting in 1989 with the Double Eagle. Another thing I think it's pretty interesting to point out, notice where the slide serrations are. They've moved them forward, so back here, if you're used to a 1911, the slide serrations on a regular 1911 come back closer to the rear of the slide. On the Double Eagle, they moved them forward, so it's all too easy if you grab the slide like that to grab slick stainless steel and not really be able to operate the pistol effectively. But for all of its quirks, it's a neat gun to have in the collection. I hope you guys again enjoyed coming out, taking a look at it. If you have any questions about anything in the video or about this pistol, you can definitely ask those questions down below. After a video goes live, I do try to stick around for the first couple of days to answer the questions you guys may have. Also, if you haven't already, please swing by and check out Copper Custom. If you want to support the Military Arms channel, it's the best possible way to do so. Also, if you haven't already, please check out full30.com. That's full30.com. We've taken all the web's best firearms content creators and brought them under one roof, and that is full30.com. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Did it to me once. One time out of like 300 rounds this afternoon. It's goofy.